Feels like football weather in Chicago, but this is a huge softball weekend just up the road in Evanston.
Absolutely. It's Big Ten softball weather, Dave, and we're excited. Softball season is here, and can't wait for the matchup that we have on deck this weekend.
It does not feel like spring, but it is, in fact, spring, and Big Ten softball is our big story today. We want to get you caught up on where things have been and where they are going. So here's what you need to know in the softball world. Sammy's alma mater has been the story in the conference so far. Northwestern up to number 6 in the nation in one of the polls. 3-time defending regular season champ Michigan is ranked as well. Again, those two meet for a huge weekend series starting today in Evanston. We'll get you ready for that. They both boast top 20 pitching staffs as measured by ERA, as does Michigan State. Nebraska, Minnesota, Indiana have been hitting for power, top 30 in the nation in homers per game. So let's dive into some of these teams, Sammy. And again, kind of giving people a big picture. Give them a sense of what they may have missed if they're just catching up on softball. So what are the teams that have impressed you so far?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of teams in the conversation right now. They had tremendous outings in their non-conference part of the season, but specifically as we look and transfer into conference play, I think Wisconsin had a tremendous first half of their season. They only had a single loss to an unranked opponent. Ohio State getting a lot of votes in various polls, but to me, I mean, you said it, Northwestern is clearly the talk of the town right now, conference level and nationally. They have a team that can really do a lot of damage this year. But I would say specifically looking at the conference play in the Big Ten, I think the dark horse that a lot of people are not talking about right now is the Nebraska Cornhuskers. They, tremendous opening series last weekend, took a doubleheader in Ann Arbor against Michigan. Their first wins in Ann Arbor ever
Wow.
in program history. So just they have a young squad. They have a lot of key pieces, and they're just really bought into the underdog mentality that Coach Ravel is instilling in them this year.
It's interesting, too, because Nebraska, I mean, for those who follow college softball, a historically strong program, and yet have not been to the NCAA tournament since 2016. So kind of a revival here in Lincoln, a team that can really hit the ball. And we'll talk about that in a second. Let's focus in on Northwestern again. They're the highest ranked team. They have really been good here. How good is this team? Like, are they Women's College World Series good this year?
I think they're doing everything that they need to do to be in that national conversation at the end of the year. They have a tremendous lineup. They have all the pieces to really make a run, and fate is kind of in their hands. Again, they did everything that they needed to do against an elite non-conference schedule this year, not just competing against the best teams across the nation, but beating the best teams across the nation. But really, the story of Northwestern's season is going to be, as far as Danielle Williams, their ace pitcher, takes them this year.
And she has been amazing. 26 straight innings at this point without allowing an earned run. We're going to see her on the mound later today, and we'll get into that matchup, Northwestern and Michigan. So the Wildcats have fabulous pitching. They're also pretty good offensively. They're not quite as good as some of these other teams, but give us a sense of their strengths on the offensive side.
Yeah, I think they're a veteran team. They have 6 seniors in the starting lineup, and just top to bottom, they aren't putting up the offensive numbers that we've seen, to your point, across some of the other teams in the conference, but they haven't had to because they have the Danielle Williams on the mound. I mean, it's no coincidence to me that she's had 22 appearances this year and Northwestern has 22 wins this year. It's just what she's able to do, the freedom that she's able to give her offense, and even the rest of their pitching staff, right? They're not being tasked to throw 7-inning complete games. Keep us in the game late. Let's push across some runs, and then let's bring in our ace to close the deal for us.
Yeah, that's what's interesting. We were talking about this. We had Kate Rohan on yesterday, as you and I discussed, and she was talking about kind of that balancing act of when even if Williams doesn't start a game, that you can bring her out of the bullpen to close things out. So she is a fantastic weapon to have. And again, we talked about this yesterday, if you weren't with us though, their best 26-game start in program history. And this is a program that's been to 5 College World Series. So this is a really good program, but again, historically very good, and 6-2 against ranked teams this year. What about Michigan? This is the team that has won 3 straight regular season titles in the Big Ten. I think, were the consensus kind of coming into the year that this would be the best team. They're certainly very good. They are ranked nationally, so it's not like they've fallen off a cliff, but maybe not quite at the level people expected them to be at. Why not?
Yeah, I think it's hard to say that they're having an off year, right? And putting up the body of work that they have this year. But, they come in, to your point, they're the 3-time defending Big Ten champions. They had, Big Ten Coach of the Year last year, Big Ten Player of the Year last year, Big Ten Pitcher of the Year last year. And I think, in speaking with Coach Hutchins and being able to watch their opening series against Nebraska, I think they're a team that's just struggling to find their confidence a little bit. They reverting back to playing both non-conference and conference competition this year. I think they're a team that offensively needs to be a little bit more consistent, needs to trust their stuff a little bit more. They very much like Northwestern has 2 All-American pitchers in their bullpen, and they've been able to keep themselves in games and keep themselves in the national conversation. But I really think, you can never count them out. Any lineup that has Alex Storako and Megan Bobian and Lexi Blair and Christina Burkhart in the mix for Michigan, they've hit a little bit of bump in the road. But this weekend is going to be huge for them. Can they come back in Evanston against Northwestern and really kind of get the ship steering in the right direction again?
And again, we're talking about a program, 12 Women's College World Series. So, they have been the preeminent program in this league. So that does bring us to this weekend. It is amazing to me that Michigan has not played in Evanston since 2011. How is that possible? That's nuts. But so they are going to play here. It's a huge showdown. We have 2 of the 3 games here on the Big Ten Network. Thrilled to have those. Give people a sense of kind of how big this series is for each of these programs.
Yeah, absolutely. Even, with Michigan dropping the opening series last week to Nebraska, this is the series that everyone had circled when the schedule was announced to say this could be potentially a Big Ten championship matchup, right? It's definitely going to have at least regular season champion implications in terms of who's able to come away with this series victory. But you just have 2 teams that historic programs, but are in 2 very different places right now. Again, Northwestern, just 12-game winning streak, just firing on all cylinders right now. Then you have Michigan, who has dropped 3 of their past 4, but still a huge threat. And we have quite a matchup on deck in Evanston this weekend.
And Michigan has owned this series historically. They've won 16 of the last 18 matchups between these 2. The pitching duel should be fabulous. Give us a sense of what you're looking forward to there.
You couldn't ask for a better pitchers matchup, truly. Just all-American aces going at it. I have to imagine if I had to put my money on it, in Game 1, we're going to see Alex Storako, again, defending Big Ten Pitcher of the Year, All-American against Danielle Williams, former Big Ten Pitcher of the Year, former All-American, and just it's going to be about which pitchers are on. Storako has struggled over her past couple of appearances, but prior to that, she was 13-0. Danielle Williams is 13-1 currently. Their makeups and the effect that they have on offenses are both so similar, and I'm just really, really excited to see, how those games unfold this weekend.
Just give people a sense, a little perspective. We're 7 weeks into the season. Between them, these 2 have 5 Big Ten Pitcher of the Week awards this year. Now, there's some weeks where there are multiple players winning the award, so it's a little deceptive, but still, again, it gives you a sense for how good these 2 are. You mentioned earlier this notion of non-conference games being back, and for those who didn't follow it closely, last year, the Big Ten only played conference games, again, kind of a byproduct of COVID. How important was it to get the non-conference games reintroduced this year in order to kind of strengthen the Big Ten's resumes nationally?
It's huge. In my opinion, it was the reason that Michigan was not given a top 16 seed, a host seed last year in the NCAA tournament. Both the Big Ten and the ACC chose to only play a conference schedule, and the implications from the selection committee's eyes were huge. Just the you're not playing, cross-conference competition, especially in a sport that has been historically dominated by the Pac-12 and SEC teams. You need to have those teams on your schedule. And so, credit to the Big Ten, credit to the coaching staffs for proving and going out and having the non-conference strength of schedules that they had. And especially as we, revert back into conference play now, I think it's going to be instrumental to have that visibility that they did on the national level and just figure out, for Northwestern in particular, can they close the deal? Can they keep the, pedal on the gas, if you will, and finish out conference play strong?
Yeah, it was interesting in talking to Kate Drohan yesterday because she said, I put together this brutal schedule, and you learn a lot about your team. And what she learned is she has a really good one. But again, should be fabulous here later today on the Big Ten Network, Michigan and Northwestern. We're going to get more from Sammy coming up. She's going to let us know the players to watch in the Big Ten this year. But I want to let you know, Johnny Davis is going pro, Jaden Ivey's going pro, and Travion Williams is going pro. So that's the story out of basketball, and Mike DeCourcy is joining us from the Final Four in New Orleans. Mike, how many Final Fours is this now for you?
This is my 32nd covering.
32nd Final Four. I wish we were there with you, but sadly we're not for obvious reasons. Let's dive into the Big Ten season a little bit, and I mentioned the guys who are turning pro. We already know Keegan Murray's going, E.J. Liddell as well. Kind of the list has started to grow here. What's your feeling in terms of who the best pro in that group will be?
Well, for me, the best one is Jaden Ivey. I've said that I believe he's the most dynamic player in college basketball, or was at the end of the season, and that he will be, when he walks across the NBA draft stage in late June and shakes Adam Silver's hand, as soon as he gets to the other side and he's officially an NBA player, he'll be one of the 2 or 3 most dynamic players in the entire league. And we've seen with players like Russell Westbrook and John Morant what that can mean to a player. The ability to rise above even the best athletes in the world. Jaden's added a terrific shot, jump shot. It's really a set shot, but he's really good at making it. He'll be able to get that off at the NBA level because he gets so much space with his dynamism. He can play both the wing and the point guard position. He's had enough point guard experience now, at least playmaking experience with the Boilermakers. So I think he's going to be a terrific pro, but it's not to the exclusion of what I think of Keegan Murray and Johnny Davis, who I think will be extraordinary as well.
You and I have talked quite a bit during the course of this year about part of what has made the Big Ten different this year was the star power translated, that the star power wasn't just college star power, but professional star power. And again, you're probably going to have 3 guys chosen in the lottery to that point, may end up with as many as 5 or 6 first-round picks coming out of the Big Ten. Is that how you'll remember this year, as kind of the season of individual stardom in the Big Ten?
Yeah, it's been a long time since we've had that in the Big Ten, but maybe since anybody's had that. I mean, 3 players on the All-America consensus first team is exceptional. It was unfortunate for the way the tournament developed that all of those players were on teams that needed them to be everything in a way, especially Wisconsin with Johnny Davis, but to a lesser extent, the other 2 as well. And it just was, at least in the case of Iowa, it just wasn't quite enough to support that, or at least in that particular match that they had against Richmond. And then Purdue, in some ways, I think they had too much. I always worried from the time I first saw them play in person in the Florida State game back in the ACC Big Ten Challenge. I thought that in some ways they might have too much. And I think that's how it played out. They really, in a lot of ways, struggled to get the best out of all their guys. Jaden, I think they did for the most part. Travion to an extent, but even him, I thought that in that final game, they could have used more from him, and it might have helped them.
Been so many opinions on kind of what went wrong in the NCAA tournament for the Big Ten. What's your perspective on why things did not go as those of us who follow the league closely might have hoped?
Well, I think that that's the difference. Dave, you were hoping that it would do well, and obviously the players and teams were hoping, and the fans. And then there are the people out there who were hoping it would go badly so that they could continue the narrative from a year ago when it did go badly. The 2021 NCAA tournament was not a good one for the Big Ten. But I would argue that the 2022 was just sort of okay. It wasn't awful. It wasn't extraordinary. Now, the failure of Purdue to get past St. Peter's was significant. There was an opportunity there as the number 3 seed in the region with both the 1 and the 2 eliminated, and you're playing a 15. That's a pretty big opportunity to let go. But the rest of the league actually performed pretty close to what it should have. Based on seeding, I did the numbers on this. Based on seeding, they won 1 fewer game than they should have. Not seeding relative to the matchup. I didn't go that deep into it. But relative to your seed, they were supposed to win 1 more game than they did. That's the reality of this league. They got 9 teams in. I think that was an exceptional performance to have a regular season. Based on what we expected coming into the year, I thought most of us who analyzed this, certainly I felt this way, that there was a significant drop-off. There was going to be one between the 6th and 7th and anything below. And it turned out not to be true. The bottom of the league was very competitive. Penn State played terrific basketball. Nebraska hung in there to the end. Northwestern had some good nights. And then the middle of the league was terrific, at least relative to what a middle of a league might be. And that's why the league ended up with 9 bids. I am not putting a positive spin on this because I'm telling you that a year ago, I would have said, no, that was not good enough. With all the teams they had seated at the top of the bracket, the early losses, only 1 team to the Elite 8. That was not what the Big Ten standard is. But this, in a lot of ways, was a successful season. It would have been a very successful season if Purdue had been at least able to get to the Elite 8, and certainly if they'd made the Final Four and been here. But I reject the notion that this was a continuation of a trend.
Yeah, I think last year the difference was you had 2 1 seeds and 2 2 seeds. And those teams, as you say, like kind of your expectation when you're a 1 seed is to end up in the Final Four. When you're in a 2 seed, to end up in the regional final, and to only end up with 1 team in the Elite 8 last year speaks to underperforming. And you and I have talked a lot about this. I mean, since 2000, when Michigan State won a national championship, going into this year, the Big Ten was tied with the ACC for the most Final Four teams in that stretch. They just hadn't brought home the ultimate title and won a national championship, but again, had gotten to the Final Four as well as anyone else. It's really these last 2 years that have been aberrational. So we'll see. And one of the things we've talked about here as we've deconstructed it is guard play, maybe not totally being up to snuff. Do you buy into that? I mean, college basketball, particularly in March, I've always thought is a guards game. This has been more of a big man league these past couple of years. Do you think that is part of it?
I think that's part of it, but it was a problem. Guard play was a problem for a lot of teams this year. And some of it was about fighting through that, fighting around it. Ultimately, Duke changed the way they play and relied much less on the point guard position. And they fought through that all year long. They benched Jeremy Roach. They tried Trevor Keels there. They tried running the offense through Wendell Moore. And ultimately, they came back to changing their approach on offense, to playing much more structurally than they ordinarily do it to, because it was the best way to get everybody involved without forcing something on Jeremy Roach he wasn't able to handle. The teams that were able to pass the fact that they weren't great at guard. Kansas, also not. But they had Remy Martin waiting there to try to use him in the right situations once he got healthy. And that got them here. Carolina changed their point guard situation. They went from Caleb Love to RJ Davis. When they were playing Caleb, they were not as successful. They went to RJ, switched the positional responsibilities, and now they're here. So it's really been a problem all across college basketball. I don't know if that's a long-term thing. I'd have to see more. And because of the pandemic, I did see a lot of the high school players the last year or two, whether or not we're going to get back into having more good quality point guards in college basketball. But you look at all those All-America teams we were talking about with all the Big Ten guys, their point guards were few and far between on those 15-man teams.
Yeah, no doubt. You're mentioning Duke and Carolina. How many Final Fours you've covered? Where does this game tomorrow fit among the most hyped national semifinals?
Yeah, I know a lot of people. Jay Williams, who played for the Blue Devils and works in the media now, was one of the people who immediately said it was the biggest college basketball game ever to hit the Final Four. I've been around long enough, covered 3 decades plus worth of them, and been around for 5 decades plus of them. And I don't think that it rises to the level, from my experience, of the Duke UNLV game in '91. UNLV that year was undefeated, Duke was one of the few teams looked at as being a challenger to them once they won the Midwest region and played so well up there. I thought that was a bigger deal than this, but you've got Mike Krzyzewski's final season on the line, the chance for them to win a championship. Obviously, the rivalry with Duke, with Carolina, which I consider to be the best we have in American sports. So I think all of that plays into it. But Carolina is an 8 seed, and they are not an extraordinary team. Doesn't mean they can't win this championship, but that it doesn't have the weight to me of the best games I've seen here.
Yeah, well, you certainly couldn't script it better. But, I mean, in hindsight, no doubt that Duke-UNLV game was one of the great national semifinals that we have ever seen. What about Villanova against Kansas? Can the Wildcats hang with the Jayhawks, you think, without Justin Moore?
I think it's going to be very hard. The key player in that may be a young man named Brian Antoine, who was a 5-star prospect, McDonald's All-American coming out of high school, and has had one of those really difficult injury-type careers. We've seen that at times in the Big Ten, obviously, a guy who just can't stay healthy, and that's been him. Really bad luck with injuries to his knee, to his shoulder. Started this year with an injury and missed about the first half of the season. So now he gets his big opportunity, and we'll see how that goes. I'm not rooting for anybody, but I certainly am rooting for him to have a big day.
What are your predictions? Who do you ultimately see coming out as the national champ?
I have Duke and Kansas playing in the final and Duke winning. But remember, I'm the guy who only has one Final Four team still standing, so I'm not sure how much you should invest in that.
That's one more than I have, my friend. So congratulations to you. Mike, I hope you're still standing after all of this. I mean, you know, the food, the beverage in New Orleans, enjoy yourself. I have never wanted more to be in Houston than I want to be in Houston a year from now. So hopefully we'll be breaking bread there, obviously many times before then. But we need to get the Big Ten back to Final Four, but enjoy it without us.
Thanks, Dave.
All right, that is an interesting story this week from Nicole Auerbach in The Athletic, talking about the potential impact of the new media rights deals and a 12-team college football playoff were it to happen, with the conclusion being that those factors combined would create a massive gap in terms of annual payout per school between the Big Ten and the SEC and everyone else, meaning the Power Five might actually be more accurately described as a Power Two. Nicole is joining us now. She's the women's Final Four in Minneapolis. Nicole, I think that a lot of us who are in the media assume that people who are fans follow this media rights stuff really closely. The truth is probably a lot of them don't. So let's kind of back up before we get into it and just kind of explain to people why the Big Ten in particular right now, as kind of the first league up, is so well positioned.
Yeah, so every conference has made strategic decisions about how they were going to approach media rights deals. And part of the dynamics that were just displayed in that graph are like the ACC is locked into a deal through 2036. So they can't improve those annual payouts to their conference members, and they're just going to have to watch themselves get leapfrogged by leagues like the Pac-12. Now, the SEC just did its big exclusive deal with ESPN. ESPN bought that Game of the Week package from that previously had been owned by CBS. So now they have exclusive rights. They're making a ton of money from ESPN. And the Big Ten's deal's up next. You also have the Pac-12, the Big 12 coming up, and then whatever that expanded CFP deal looks like, that will go to market as well. So there's only a certain amount of money in the market, but we do know that there is a lot when it comes to live sports. The Big Ten is incredibly valuable. I mean, think about the markets that you have, the brands that you have, the draw, the viewership, and the fervent fan bases. So, you know, if you want something that is a sure thing in a live sports world, in a changing media landscape, Big Ten football is that. And so I think, you know, you're going to see you're going to see the value reflected when that goes to market, which is happening now because the deal is coming up. But everyone knows the Big Ten is going to make a lot of money. Everyone knows the SEC makes a lot of money, but it is really stark to see it displayed that way. Because what happens if those two leagues are paying each of their members $100 million a year and they're nearly doubling that of the other power conferences? I mean, that just creates a different stratosphere than what we even have now.
Well, what does happen? I mean, what are the implications of having two leagues that far outstrip everyone else in terms of the money they're getting per school. What would that mean pragmatically for college athletics?
Well, all of this could change in the coming years based on different legal challenges where, maybe you do get to a model that's an employee-employer relationship. So the revenue goes in different directions. But let's say for now, we could see that easily reflected in head coaching salaries and assistant coaching pools. A couple of years ago, my colleague at The Athletic, Chantel Jennings, wrote a piece about why the Pac-12 was lagging behind. And one of the things that she noted was the assistant coaches on the football side, the good ones, were going in what we would have called a lateral move to the SEC or the Big Ten or somewhere else because they were making more money there. So you can extrapolate that in when the money is even more dramatically different, that it would be hard for those leagues to retain the good coaches. And then again, the talent will just continue to flow to the places with the most resources. So you can see that, yes, in terms of head coaches and assistant coaches, but every sport and every level of resource would be different if you're talking about that drastic of money that's coming in. I mean, you see who's able to pay buyouts, who's able to change coaches, who's able to fight off, other schools or the NFL or whoever is trying to poach their coach. All of that stuff comes into play.
What are the assumptions that underlie that graph, just so people kind of understand what you're basing it on? Because obviously you have to make some assumptions to try to extrapolate what it's going to look like.
Yeah, so Navigate is the data firm that put together those numbers. So they were extrapolating based on trends and historical trends in media rights deals. Again, the Big Ten has had a number of deals, and the 6-year deals come up, and you can kind of project on how those were valued. Also looking at the marketplace right now, there's a number of traditional media companies that are interested in live sports. So that's obviously Disney and ESPN, but also Fox, CBS, NBC, and even Turner. So there's going to be that competing interest, and obviously you only need 2 bidders to drive up the price. But when you have that many people interested in being in the market, that's going to have ripple effects on all the leagues and the CFP deal whenever that comes. One of the other assumptions on the CFP deal is that leagues would be given different payouts based on how far they advance in the CFP or how many teams they get in. Kind of like basketball, we talk about the units. It matters, how many teams the Big Ten gets in, and then if they continue to advance, it affects the payout. So that also, if you look at historical trends with the SEC and the Big Ten, you can project out that those leagues would also perform really well in a 12-team playoff with that payout model.
Right. Okay. So the underlying assumptions are media rights deals, but also CFP payoff as well. Really interesting stuff. And of course, it's going to be fascinating to follow it here from our perspective in the Big Ten to see what happens here in the next couple of years. Do want to talk a little spring football with you. Let's start with Ohio State. The defense was not where it needed to be last year. Enter Jim Knowles. What are you watching in Columbus as they head through spring practice here and head into the fall?
Well, obviously, when you're going through a shift in a coordinator, it's a lot of new terminology and scheme stuff. So, just sort of how everyone responds to that. I think there's always a lot of optimism in the spring, but this is a really big overhaul and a really important hire for Ryan Day. And, we saw what Jim Knowles was able to do at Oklahoma State and the way that defense played and really became the calling card of a team that nearly made the playoff last year. So I'm just very curious to watch that get phased in and watch that get implemented. And again, to see one of the things that we saw in the way that they were playing against some of those better teams last year was it looked like they were a step behind. It looked like they were a step slow or not as athletic. So I want to see what the pieces that he has. We know there's so much talent and there is that athleticism on the defense, how you reshape that and how you reposition people to be in the best case scenario where they're playing to their strengths. So I'm just curious to see how all of that goes and what the players respond to about the different dynamics and the terminology, the playbook, and all of those things that come with an install.
It was an issue all year, but it really came to a head, of course, in the Michigan game, gave up nearly 300 yards on the ground. As a result, the Wolverines ended up in the college football playoff. And then we had this month where we were in limbo, Nicole, not really knowing what was going on with Jim Harbaugh, the flirtation with the NFL. He ends up coming back. He had to replace both of his coordinators. We're going to have Michigan's spring game tomorrow. I mean, they're essentially done with spring practice. But give us a sense of what intrigues you about the Wolverines with all of that in the background as they head into the fall.
I'm fascinated by all of that and the dynamics there. I mean, I don't think that people necessarily faulted Jim Harbaugh for looking at the NFL opportunities as someone with a background in that space. And it's a totally different path. It's not necessarily like he was, comparing apples to apples, but it did drag out for a long time to the point where coming out of it, he had to basically say, I'm not going to do this every year. I'm not going to put you guys through this because it is a really long, drawn out process. It's really late in the cycle. So it would put Michigan at a disadvantage in a hiring, if they needed to be in a hiring mode. So I think all of that and coming out of that and the personal dynamics, psychological dynamics that come out of something like that are really interesting. And as you mentioned, changing coordinators, certainly when you lose the Broyles Award winner, that's a dynamic that's interesting. And there's always been, a good amount of cooks in the kitchen on the offensive side when you have a head coach who has that background. And they've had a number of different co-coordinators and different coaches in those types of roles. But that is a dramatic shift, especially, when you are returning a lot of key players on the offensive side. So very curious to see how those pieces fit together as well. I do think we end up talking a lot about coaching changes throughout the offseason, but they really do determine how this all works. I mean, the way that Jim Harbaugh changed his staff a season ago directly contributed to actually getting over the hump with Ohio State reaching the playoffs. So that stuff is really important, and I'm very curious to see how it plays out and if there's any residual effects of Jim Harbaugh's flirtation with the NFL.
Get a little bit of a sneak peek, as I said, tomorrow here on the Big Ten Network with Michigan's spring game. The National Sports Writer of the Year, Nicole Auerbach from The Athletic. Enjoy the women's Final Four, and we will see you soon. Thanks, my friend.
Thanks, Dave.
Men's lacrosse season well underway, and the Big Ten boasts the top-ranked team in the nation. Maryland leading the way. They're 8-0. A few other teams earning recognition as well. Rutgers is number 4. Ohio State is 11. Johns Hopkins and Michigan receiving votes as well. Big Ten Network lacrosse analyst Mark Dixon, who played at Johns Hopkins, is joining us now. Mark, let's start here. And I mean, number 1 team in the country, so I guess I have a little bit of a sense of where you're going. But how good is Big Ten lacrosse?
Dave, it's a tremendous conference. And last year was unique in that the Big Ten played a conference-only schedule. And so these teams played each other twice. And they beat the heck out of one another. And the narrative became established that, well, the Big Ten is down because you had teams with close to 500 records or sub 500 records, and you really couldn't get a sense of how they would fare against outside competition because they were just worried about winning against one another. So it really showed the grittiness and the toughness of this conference. And when you fast forward to 2022, this is a conference, the Big Ten, that is 34-16 against out-of-conference competition. And that includes wins over teams from the ACC, from the Ivy League, from the Patriot League. So the Big Ten taking on all comers in 2022 and really showing its mettle on how it compares on a national scale, with last year only being a conference-only situation. You got University of Maryland ranked 1st in the country with a bullet, by the way, and we'll talk about that more. Rutgers coming in at number 4. You have Ohio State at number 11. But don't sleep on teams like Johns Hopkins, Michigan, and Penn State. They're all capable. They've all won some big games so far in 2022. So it's safe to say that the Big Ten Men's Lacrosse Conference is as strong as ever.
Do you see Maryland as the favorite nationally right now?
It's always difficult to project when you're in the month of April, but the way Maryland has played thus far, they are the superior team in men's college lacrosse. A couple weeks ago, the narrative was, well, it's Maryland, Virginia, and then everyone else. Well, Maryland made it everyone else after them by beating the Cavaliers 23-12 at Audi Field in D.C. It was a superior effort on the offensive end, on the defensive end, in the middle of the field. Maryland just dominated. And if you look at the body of work of the Terrapins, they've already beaten Notre Dame. They've already beaten Princeton. They've beaten Syracuse, among others. But that win against Virginia, that is the one that really made people take notice of this Terrapin team, saying, wow, if they could do that to Virginia, what is this team capable of? So really at this point in the season, Dave, the sky is the limit for the Maryland Terrapins.
Well, 65 goals in the last 3 games, which is their most in a 3-game stretch since 1956. So it has been a while since we've seen Maryland this prolific. What about Rutgers? I mean, they're at number 4. How good is the Scarlet Knights team?
This is a very good team, and they answered the question, who's the second best team at this stage of this Big Ten season behind the Maryland Terrapins? And they fell behind to Ohio State 3-0 and then just blitzed the Buckeyes for the rest of that contest, winning going away 18-7. When you talk about Rutgers, you talk about a NASCAR-type pace, a NASCAR offense. That is fueled by the short-stick defensive midfielders led by Brennan Kamish and Tommy Coyne. And, Dave, this is a Rutgers team that graduated or lost their top 4 scorers from a year ago. And they've just replenished them with a player like Ross Scott, who has been terrific so far in 2022 with 49 points. You've got transfers in Mitch Bartolo and Brian Cameron, and they may have the best goaltender in the country in Colin Kirst. So this is a team that really from top to bottom, and they play a unique pace in that they're always looking to push transition. They are sprinting from one end of the field to the other to get it going offensively. So this is a Rutgers team that made it to the NCAA quarterfinals a year ago. It'll be interesting to see if they can go even farther in this new season.
9-1 start for them, their best in nearly 70 years. And we'll get a chance to see this Rutgers team here on the Big Ten Network coming up this weekend against Johns Hopkins. You will have the call in that one. Give us a sense of what we should expect. Obviously, part of it is Rutgers pushing tempo. What else?
First of all, can't wait. Sunday Night Lacrosse on the Big Ten Network just hits different. And we've got a tremendous following. Should be a good crowd at High Point Solution Stadium in Piscataway. But when you look at the game itself, this is a Johns Hopkins team that smacked Rutgers last year in the semifinals of the Big Ten tournament after dropping the 2 regular season meetings. So the way Hopkins did it was they just ran by that short stick defense of the Rutgers Scarlet Knights. So look for Hopkins to attack in the midfield, trying to expose those matchups. Look for Rutgers to try to shore that up, but also look for that NASCAR pace and look for a defense that really is going to be looking to take away the Johns Hopkins passing lanes. Hopkins is one of the better passing teams in the Big Ten. They don't necessarily, that was an outlier performance last year of Hopkins running by these Rutgers defenders. They tend to beat you off ball with slick passing and ball movement. Look for Rutgers to cut down those passing lanes, try to win their individual matchups. On the other end, Johns Hopkins is going to have to get a big performance out of their goaltender, Josh Kirsten. He's saving around 50% on the season. When he plays well, Hopkins tends to be successful. So Kirsten between the pipes is going to be a big variable in this game.
Mark, give us just a couple of names we need to know. Again, if people haven't tuned into lacrosse yet this year and they want to be somewhat conversant in it as we head into this big game coming up this weekend and the rest of the year, who are the players that you need to know a little bit about?
Well, you can take your pick on Maryland. We'll start with Logan Wisnauskas, their outstanding attackman. He's got 45 points so far this season. He's a leader of a Maryland offense that has 5 players, including himself, with 20 points or more. That's incredible balance. Luke Weirman is also a tremendous face-off man for the University of Maryland. He's winning 68%. Ohio State features a high-scoring attackman, Jack Myers. He has 21 goals, 26 assists so far on the season. He's a tremendous talent. Michigan, Josh Zawada. The guy's already got 50-plus points in his first 9 games of 2022. He's an outstanding shooter, a terrific scorer. And if you're looking for defenders, Rutgers, Ethan Rawl, probably the best long stick midfielder in the conference. And then you have Colin Kirst, the tremendous goaltender. So in a bevy of stars, Dave, those are some people to really pay attention to.
Sounds great, Mark. Looking forward to seeing the game coming up on Sunday. Again, as you said, Rutgers and Johns Hopkins in primetime, 7 Eastern time here on the Big Ten Network. Cannot wait. Mark Dixon, thanks so much for your insights. Going to finish the show the way we started with softball. Some individuals to know. In terms of power, no one in the nation has hit more homers than Nebraska's Billy Andrews, already with 17. Minnesota's Natalie Den Hartog is 4 behind her. Indiana's Cora Bassett, Northwestern's Rachel Lewis, both with double-digit totals. On the Hill, we talked about Williams and Storako. Michigan State's Ashley Miller actually leading the conference in ERA, 1/100th of a percentage point ahead of Williams. Those two both in the top dozen nationally. Sammy Netling's back with us. I want to help people get familiar with some of these players. If you're leading the nation in home runs, that feels like a good place to start. Tell us a little bit about Andrews.
Yeah, Andrews has been unbelievable for the Cornhuskers this year in her second campaign. She was the only freshman last year to be named to first team All Big Ten, but she's just picking up exactly where she left off, as you said, leading the nation in home runs. She came into conference play, leading the conference in 5 total offensive categories, and has just really been a crucial part of that nucleus for Coach Revelle this year.
So 17 homers on April 1st. The school record is 22. I like her chances. I think she's got a chance to break that, given where she is right now. That is really remarkable. Tell us a little bit about Den Hartog. Led the Big Ten in homers last year, has been a staple for Minnesota. Give us a sense of her.
Yeah, I just love watching her play. I mean, just on both sides of the ball, she's such a presence in the outfield for the Golden Gophers, but also just, you know, what she's able to do, the body of work she's been able to put together across her time in Minnesota, and to claim, you know, over the weekend she broke the program record for home runs. And when you look at just some of the names that have come through that program, you know, Tyler Walker, Caitlin Richardson, Kendall Lindemann, and to be at the top of that list, just I think is such a testament to the offensive presence that she is, and just the leader that she is for that Gopher offense.
Already been an All Big Ten pick a couple of times in her career. We had mentioned Northwestern and the star pitcher in Danielle Williams, but Rachel Lewis is having an unbelievable year. And you want to talk about a versatile player. She's about as versatile as they come.
Yeah, I another player that I selfishly just could talk all day about. She's so versatile. She's just such a competitor, and especially on offense, what she's able to do, you know, hitting for power, hitting for contact, you know, leading the team in runs scored, up there with RBIs and also stolen bases, and just to have that well-rounded, you know, a full body picture of an offensive threat from the right side, I think is something that we don't see as often anymore. And again, it's just a testament to her coming back for her final campaign, and just helping to lead this Wildcat offense, and you know, just having a tremendous year.
And this is her COVID year, right? So she's kind of taking advantage of that, a graduate student. And yeah, I mean, just amazing to see what a great fielder she is, that she led the league in stolen bases. I mean, just so many things that she does well. Let's finish up in Madison. This is really an amazing story. Give us some insight here.
Yeah, Kayla Conway, her story, I think, is one of my favorites, just because of everything that she's had to go throughout her time in Madison. I mean, talk about an athlete who came in just extremely, you know, highly recruited, just a lot of high expectations for what she could do, and the contribution she could make with the Badgers offensively, and just was plagued by injuries, unfortunately. But in the time that she has had, she's made such an impact. 2019, you know, Big Ten Player of the Year, unanimous first team All-American, and to come back for her final season, for her final year of eligibility, has not skipped a beat, has an over 400 career batting average, and just one of the most feared hitters in Big Ten and all of college softball.
And she missed 2 years with injuries, right?
Yeah.
It's remarkable. Last full season for her, 2019, and now playing great. What about on the Hill? We touched a little bit on Danielle Williams earlier, but just give people a sense of what makes her so special.
Yeah, I think, you know, and Kate Drohan, when she was on yesterday, kind of spoke to this. I think just what she's able to do from the left side is just such a crucial piece to her success. You know, she can throw a curveball on both sides of the plate, and she can throw a changeup in pretty much any count, and she's just been dominant across her career, and just continues to put up phenomenal outings this year.
I got my terminology wrong, right? By the way, in the circle,
in
not
the circle,
on the hill.
in the
Yes.
circle.
All right. What about Storako?
Yeah, another just, I mean, can talk about her all day. All-American, reigning Big Ten Player of the Year, led the nation in strikeout percentage last year. And, you know, I know we talked about, she had a little bit of a bump in the road, but I'm expecting her to get back on track this weekend in Evanston.
The unanimous Big Ten Pitcher of the Year last year. And there are some good pitchers in the Big Ten, so that speaks to how good she was. We saw Ashley Miller's numbers off the top, maybe overshadowed by some of those more veteran pitchers, but man, she is a great up-and-comer.
Yeah, and to be in the top of the conference, ranked 6th nationally in ERA, again, amongst the All-American pitchers that we have in this conference, I think is just such a testament to Ashley Miller. She's only a sophomore, and expecting big things out of her and the Spartans throughout her career.
Yeah, that's pretty remarkable. I mean, to put up those kinds of numbers. She had a really good freshman year as well, and having a fabulous sophomore year as well. This was a ton of fun. I feel well-versed. I feel ready to go home and watch some softball today. Again, Michigan and Northwestern